Hey hoy, and welcome to the first Seikave lesson on YouTube. Today's lesson is about the Middle East, and it's actually about how we in the West see the Middle East, how we depict the Middle East, or at least how we think that what the Middle East looks like, and how we have been doing that for centuries now, and probably where that is based on. Because there's a fair point in saying that most of this is based on a book that's actually 1200 years old, so more than 1,000 years old. And I'm going to talk a bit about the book, 1001 Arabian Nights. That was first published in Paris, for instance, in France, in the early 1700s. And then it started to influence our culture a lot up until this point. So I'm going to talk to you about a bit about the book, and then I'm going to show you some examples how we can still sort of trace our culture back to that book. It's called 1001 Arabian Nights, and it's a massive story that was built up from the 800s onwards, and when people started to travel around and gather stories, and storytellers traveled around and found more stories, and then they started to compile them and write them down in books, and that eventually turned out into the sort of the massive book we have nowadays. I've got a version, a copy, a Dutch translation actually, which is thousands of pages thick, it's incredible. So actually, the first part of the story is kind of interesting how it works, and it comprises it contains all the different aspects that we're going to see later on in the video. So let's get this story. The first story in the book is two brothers, two kings, one ruling India and China, and one ruling Samarkand. So both places in the Far East. So one is sort of king of the world, the big brother, and the younger brother also has a kingdom. And at some point, the big brother says to the younger brother, "Come join me for a while." And so he sends out an envoy to get the brother. And right at the moment when the brother wants to leave his palace, he's staying outside of the city gates to leave early in the morning. He goes back at night to his wife to do some final playing around. But he finds he finds his wife in sexual activity with a black slave. Oh my gosh. So he's actually feeling sad, and he kills them. So he cuts their heads off. So really violent. And he leaves his palace enraged. And when he gets to his brother a few days later, he doesn't really want to tell him. But after a while, he has to, because he finds out when his brother is away on a hunting party, the younger brother finds out that the wife of the king of the world, the king of China and India, also betrays her husband, the big king. So he feels a lot better then. So he's like, I was only betrayed, but I'm not as important. But my big brother is also betrayed by his wife, and not just with one slave, but it was a massive orgy, during all day. So he feels a lot better. And when his brother asks him, "Why do you feel a lot better? And why were you so sad in the first place?" He has to tell the brother that, his wife was cheating on him. And the brother finds out in the end. A few days later, they hide in the little brother's palace, and they see actually again that his wife is really active sexually speaking, with slaves and so on. So he's enraged and he kills them all in the end. And he says, "I'm never going to trust a woman again." So what I'll do is every day I'll marry a woman, a young girl, a virgin, and so on. And after one night of having sex with her, I'll kill her. And then the next day I'll marry to a new girl, and I have sex all night, and then I kill her. And that goes on and on and on and on and on. So after a while, everybody is really fed up with this king, because, their young girls, and their beautiful young girls, are going to his palace, and they never return, dead. So, that's not good for the spirit in a country. And the vizier, the advisor of the Shah, of the king, has this beautiful daughter called Sherazad. And at some point, Sherazad says, "Daddy, send me to the king, and I will finish this horrible bloodshed." But the vizier is obviously scared that his daughter will die, so he says, "No, no, 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 because if your plan doesn't succeed, I have to kill you in the morning, which is not something I want to do." But she persuades him and she convinces him, saying, "I will end this bloodshed." And that happens because after she goes to his palace, they have sex all night. And then in the morning, she says, "Well, we still have a few hours until sunrise. So, I know you're going to kill me, but do you want me to tell you a story before we do?" So she starts telling the king a story. And she starts off, "Once upon a time, there was this blah, 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 blah." And, you can imagine what happens. Right at the point of the maximum climax of the story, the cliffhanger, she says, "And then, at some point, oh, wait, it's sunrise, you have to kill me." But the Shah was like, "No, finish the story first, and then I'll kill you." "No, no, 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 no," she says. "I'm not finishing the story. You might want to give me another day, and I'll finish the story tomorrow, and then you can kill me." So he says, "Well, fair enough, let's do that." But the next day, she has sex all night, and then a few days before daybreak, she starts telling the rest of the story. And she starts a second story. And when that story is in a cliffhanger point, it's daybreak. And she says, merde, now you have to kill me." "No, no, no, continue." No, and you can imagine, you can sort of feel the rest of the story. Every day and every day and every day, she is in the middle of a story during daybreak, and she buys another day until after 1,001 nights, she is released from this sort of predicament from the king. And actually, I think they end up getting married or something. So that is the framework that contains these 1,001 stories in all. So in the introduction, we've had a fair share of violence and sexuality, right? So these are the basic ingredients for the things that we think are in the West are very essential to depicting the Middle East. A fairy tale book, or a story book, like the fairy tales we have. So this is Sherazad in illustrations from the 19th century, and you can see where Disney got this amazing idea of Jafar and his head. But this is not Jafar, this is actually the king, and this is Sherazad, naked, telling him stories. Because, the sensuality and the nakedness and the gorgeous, lush designs from the Middle East were the basic ingredients of the illustrations to the book of 1001 Nights. This is Sherazad telling. Actually, in the book, she asks her little sister to join as a farewell because she was going to die anyways. So in some images, you see her little sister as well. Illustrations about the story, and then there are lots and lots of stories within those 1001 stories that are about extreme violence, armies, and magic, jinns, ghosts, spirits, witches, witchcraft, wizardry, and sex. Lots and lots and lots of sex. And those were the things where the illustrators were fond of. So we have these jinns from a lamp. This pretty much looks like a 19th century woman, walking a dog. But if you look closely, you see that it's actually a black panther or something that she's walking around with. So we have these lush designs, the fabrics, the gorgeous fabrics, and you can actually argue that the women depicted are actually Western women, as we see later on again. And I'm not sure why she's wearing this. I think that's even Indian. That's not even something you see in the Middle East. But, they didn't really care about that. So we see street scenes, gorgeous designs, sort of very aggressive, masculine, warrior-like images. Camels, warriors, lush nature. So these images were actually illustrations to the 1001 stories that were published in the 19th century. And this is still fairy tale like, right? It's in a book, and these are fairy tales. So, funny is that lots of these images, these illustrations, are very sensual, where women are depicted, voluptuous women are depicted naked or semi-naked, and interestingly enough, in the same time, there is a Persian dude from present-day Iran, also creating illustrations for 1001 Nights. But if you look at these illustrations, they're completely lacking of nudity. Although he focuses on the warriors and the fighting, women are actually very chaste, right? They're wearing clothes, they're not naked. And so that's completely different from the stories themselves, because the stories are very explicit. But they decide not to show so much nudity. And in the West, we did. These are images from a ballet in 1910. The Ballet Russe, the Russian ballet, was the most important ballet in the world, and they performed and played a lot in Paris. And this was actually, I think the first performance was in 1910. And these were images from the original play. And these were the original clothing designs from the original play by Bakst. So he's made some sketches. And in 2002, there was the original Ballet Russe, so the Russian ballet, performed again the play Scheherazade. And I've got a bit of Scheherazade for you here. So this is a ballet. I'm going to skip a bit, but you can see that it's sensual. This is the orgy when this is the wife of the sultan, of the king. And the king is away, but he'll soon return. So this is the point where everything's still alright, and they have this orgy, and they're dancing, and they're in the book they're having sex, but they didn't really do that in a ballet. And after a minute or so, we get the final grand finale. It's about 30 minutes, this ballet. It's gorgeous. And if you go to Moscow or St. Petersburg, you really shouldn't go and see these amazing ballet companies. But this was actually for a music video. So it's kind of a bit different than a theater setting. Multiple cameras. And now, the king enters the scene. Listen to the music, it's great. I wonder how many of you heard the Gargamel theme from the Smurfs in that, because that's stolen from this music. And now we get some extreme violence. So we've had sensuality, sensual dancing, belly dancing, and so on, nakedness. And now we have the fierce king slashing everybody. So this is actually based on the original play, with the original choreography and the original dresses, based on his old sketches. So yeah, that's how Scheherazade is portrayed in Western ballet, whereas in India they also created a film, and you can see that in the 1950s. I think this is Aladdin, which is loosely based on a story. Well, actually, it was not really part of the original 1001 Nights, but that's a different story. We came to understand that it was part of 1001 Nights. But this is Jasmine, and she's looking rather different from the Jasmine we know. This is a film by Pasolini, with the most crazy scene I've ever seen in my life, I guess. But this is based on A Thousand and One Nights, which that's the Il fiore delle mille e una notte, A Thousand and One Nights, and we have this sort of crazy scene, which is actually the movie poster. I was When I saw this, I was like, am I right in seeing what he's actually shooting at this woman? But apparently, he's actually shooting it in the film. And this is how we see Jasmine in Walt Disney. So Aladdin, A Thousand and One Nights, throwing all kinds of Oriental stuff in that film. But it has been argued that Jasmine is the only Disney princess that actually looks sexy. And if you compare it to Snow White or to Cinderella, you could argue that they're probably right in accenting some parts of the body a bit more than they did in Snow White or Cinderella. Um, then we see some paintings from the 19th century that were, because they were so inspired by these stories that they actually took Western women, because these are all white Western Parisian women, and they made paintings with these Western women in Arabian settings, in Middle Eastern settings, as if they were sort of slaves or harem women, sort of, the Sultan of Istanbul had a few hundred wives, and they were, there was sort of sparking the imagination of Western painters and, all kinds of people. So people wanted to buy these fantasies where you could have the idea that you're in a harem in the Middle East, but actually the women you're looking at are Western women. For one, all these artists at some point went to the Middle East, and they went to Egypt or they went to Morocco, and they found that women were actually very chaste, and they were wearing veils, and as we know, Islamic women today, they're not keen in showing their bodies. In fact, men weren't even allowed close to the women quarters. So these men were kind of frustrated that they couldn't really draw and paint and make sketches of these Arabian women. So what we're seeing here is not an Arabian bride festivity, but most of the women you see are, if they are originally from that setting, they were Jews, because the Jews weren't so keen on hiding their bodies as the Muslim women. So it's kind of a sad story that all these painters try to depict the Islamic world, but they weren't actually given access to what they really wanted, the naked women. So that's kind of a sad story. The slave market, I think there's a bigger picture of this. This is a detail of a bigger painting, where they just wanted to show naked women in a very sensual style and give them some Arabic setting. This painter, actually, Delacroix, painted this fierce scene of killing and slaughtering and butchering and nakedness and so on, and all the elements you have from these fairy tales from A Thousand and One Nights. But when he actually went to the Middle East, he at some point was given permission to enter a women quarters or something. At least that's one story. And then he saw that the women are actually not looking like this, naked and dancing and begging for mercy, but they were actually sitting quietly. And the funny thing is that like 30 years later or so, there was a pun on this painting made by another painter, where he changes the women back into a more sensual style. This is something you all know. About 30 years old now, I guess. A bit more than 30 years. Fata Morgana in Efteling really builds on the fairy tale of A Thousand and One Nights, with the Sultan, with the bling, with the black slaves as protectors, as bodyguards. The exterior looking like an Oriental palace. Jinns, ghosts, spirits, evil beings, and the belly dancers. So we have everything. And in music videos, we still see, this is from the last 5 to 10 years or so. Coldplay, what was the song again? Something of the Weekend. Where they use Middle Eastern and a bit further Indian aspects to to create this exotic vibe. But usually women are depicted as gorgeous, lush, showing a lot of nakedness, sensual, and as goddesses or as warriors, and flying into midair and doing all kinds of crazy stuff that you can find in these fairy tales. Uh, Katy Perry, Dark Horse. I'm not sure who that is, but she did a video with belly dancers and sensual dances. Why not? And let's change the setting at the end of the video into this temple-like setting with a... I'm not sure what this child is doing, but she looks a bit like the Exorcist girl. So yeah, street life in India always looks good as a backdrop for your sensual video, where you Mia, bad girls. We have need for a fierce warrior on a horse in this music video, and guns, of course, because the Middle East is about guns nowadays as well. Pussycat Dolls is very sensual. They are almost naked, acting like prostitutes, dancing and so on. And the music is using a Middle Eastern theme, so to speak. Rihanna, Where Have You Been? Veiled women, sensual women, beautiful masculine dancers. So Beyonce and Shakira also use Arabic instruments in their sensual video, Beautiful Liar. And you see sort of Arabic script. It's not really Arabic, I guess, or some very bad writing. Nicki Minaj using, all kinds of Eastern fantasies in her videos as well. And probably the best, Inna. I'm not sure. I think she's from Romania, but if you look at this video, it's crazy how you see this is out on the streets, and it's unheard of in Islamic countries that you dress like this. But apparently she got away with it and created this sort of very mysterious, sensual video where she was chased by this Arabic gorgeous guy, and she was dressed in next to nothing. So still nowadays we can see that this very sensual, overly sexualized image, and the simple lives and the uncorrupted, one with nature like lifestyle of the Middle Eastern people depicted in these stories, and the fierce warriors and the mystique and the sensual and the erotic, pretty much influenced the last 200 years. At least, some parts of our culture in the past 200 years. So that's what I wanted to tell you today.